This is 10 at 10, Bottom Line, featuring Nick Cousin.
KU will win the Big 12 championship this year, I guarantee it. The Bears and Jake Cutler will win the Super Bowl this year.
Griffin Hughes.
This is going to be one of the more fun seasons I think we've ever witnessed here. The reality of it is soccer is the world's game.
And Jackson Long.
Mr. Robot from behind the three-point arc, Dean Smith was a pioneer in the game of basketball against racism in Chapel Hill and in off-the-court development of his players.
Music by Lucid Vision.
Welcome into 10 at 10, the Bottom Line, March 23rd. We're both back at full strength here after a relaxing spring break a little bit, and Griffin Hughes here with Nick Cousin. Basketball. It's all about basketball, right?
Yeah, sadly it is.
Sadly, yes. If you haven't heard, KU, they went down to Wichita State on Sunday in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament, so now they will not make the trip out to Cleveland.
For the second year in a row, they go down the round of 32.
Correct.
Gotta get past that hump.
You know, interestingly enough, just as they were last year, they were not at full strength for this game. Yeah. Last year they were missing Joel Embiid, and this year they were missing a pretty big inside post presence as well with Cliff Alexander.
Yeah, and this year, even though Bill Self said they're going to look forward to play without him, unlike last year where they said they were expecting Embiid to come back, they could not convert on getting farther in the tournament.
Well, there were three of us down there, two beat writers and our sports editor, Blair Shade. And we were kind of talking about that we didn't like the matchup because we felt that Perry Ellis wasn't at 100%. The team said he was at 100%, and he certainly was saying he was healthy, but you could tell right away he's laboring out there. It took him a little while to get going, and even though he did have a nice game, he didn't have the type of impact that he could have had. We're talking about a 6'8 guy who was being guarded by 6'3 Evan Wessel. He very easily could have scored 30 points that game at full strength. And I also think you look at Cliff Alexander, another guy who would have had his way inside. Wichita State got a ton of shots at the rim. He would have just had to stand back and swat shots. And Bill Self always loves when one guy stands in the paint there because no defensive 3 seconds. So
right.
I wouldn't say it was expected for them to lose. I thought it was expected it was going to be a very close game. And I think in the end, it was a disappointing result, but I wouldn't say anyone was too surprised.
It definitely looked like they weren't prepared to deal with Wichita State's speed. And you figure, if Cliff Alexander's in there, Wichita State doesn't have a single player above 6'8".
Yeah, all their game is all outside game, shooting threes, shooting jumpers.
Yeah. But during the run that they put on, they were able to get some production inside the paint. And a lot of that was due to Kansas not really having a true rim defender the way that they've liked to have in the past.
It was definitely, they had issues with their interior defense. I think that Bill Self needs to find another assistant that could work with them on their interior defense because, Bill Self, he preaches defense, but yesterday the inside defense was not very good.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and the defense around the perimeter was also not very good, although, to be fair, Evan Wessel, he hit a couple kind of circus shots there at the perimeter, so, not much you can do about that if you're hitting a fall-away 30-footer. There's really not much that can be done, but I definitely think the defense could have been a little bit better around the perimeter.
It just seems like the first half they hung in there. I thought they could make a lead. Coming into second half, they can take the lead, but they just came out second half and they just looked not mentally there at all.
Now, for the next couple years, what do you think the legacy of this Kansas team is really going to be when you look back at all of Bill Self's teams and how this team will be remembered?
I think this is probably one of the better teams looking at what they didn't have getting this far. I think they wouldn't have gotten this far. I think everyone was surprised that they still won the regular season Big 12 outright because of what they didn't have. They didn't have Cliff. For the last 2 games, they didn't have Perry. So, it just seemed like this team just did better than we expected as fans and as journalists. I think they definitely outperformed what they were expected, but in order for a program to be impressive, you need to go farther than the third round, especially here at KU with basketball being what it is here.
Certainly. And Dickie V had a couple great tweets about the game earlier today. We talked about that this morning.
Well, for this to be a truly vintage Kansas team, I think there need to be a 7-footer. And there wasn't one. And I think when Cliff Alexander was coming in, everyone had this idea that the impact would be similar to that of Joel Embiid. He would dominate the paint on both ends. Whether or not the body type's obviously extremely different. But I think that was the idea of the similar impact. And it's not something that happened, obviously. He was playing well in the midseason, got put in the starting role, had some foul trouble, still was more effective than any other Kansas big man not named Perry Ellis. And then the suspension comes. So I would say this is not a prototypical team, although Frank Mason does kind of embody that combo guard because Bill Self likes the 1-2.
Yeah, he does.
And maybe even similar to Sharon Collins. Their numbers matched up pretty similarly from Sharon's senior year and his sophomore year here. But even then, I wouldn't say it was prototypical. The shooters, they were more streaky shooters rather than consistent shooters. There weren't really like Tyrell Reed and Brady Morningstar out in the wing.
Right.
You had Brandon Green, who got red hot for a very brief stretch, and then for the rest of the year was actually, I don't think it's overstating to say it was pretty bad. And he was a subpar shooter for about half the year,
Right.
but he was also the best shooter in the nation for half a year. So, I definitely wouldn't say it was prototypical.
So you hear Dickie V. I mean, obviously he gets excited for quote unquote Cinderellas. Although Wichita State didn't look like much of a Cinderella in that game.
They looked way better than Kansas did.
Yeah. But he also called Kansas, not a vintage team or not a vintage Kansas team, and I definitely don't think it was. And we talked about it this morning. Scott Chasen, he said that they have to have a 7-footer to be a quote unquote vintage Kansas team. But they do have the combo guard with Frank Mason, and that's something that I don't like that Bill Self does. That he doesn't recruit true point guards; he really recruits combos. But it is what it is, I guess. At that point, Bill Self, he's considered one of the best regular season coaches in the country right now, if not ever. But in the tournament, he hasn't really enjoyed as much success. I mean, he hasn't won 11 straight NCAA tournaments,
No.
and obviously nobody's expecting that of him.
Yep.
But it also, what do you think about his shortcomings in the NCAA tournament?
Well, I think that for KU fans, just having him win the regular season title is enough for them because he still gets a lot of praise. But I think that overshadows the underperforming in the tournament. I mean, you see the last time they got in the Final Four is when they won in 2008. That was the last time they got to Final Four. The last 7 years, there hasn't been a lot of performance. The last 2 years with great teams. I mean, last year we had Andrew Wiggins, and he was number 1 overall draft pick, and we still didn't get past the same exact round of 32. So I just think that we need in the future. We shouldn't really be focusing on winning the regular season, more trying to excel in the postseason.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think it's all about the point guard. It's all about you need to have I'm a true point guard kind of guy. You need to have a true point guard to have a lot of success, especially in the tournament. Yeah. And we did the research on that. We looked at the last 15 championship teams.
And only 2 of them didn't have guards.
Exactly. And one of them was Kansas, who at that time had Sharon Collins, who was the best, closest to a true point guard Bill Self has ever had.
And the other team was Florida, who just had too many good pieces.
They had 4 first-round NBA draft picks in their front court.
Al Horford.
Exactly.
Corey
so
Brewer.
if you've got that team, I think you don't need a true point guard.
But you look at the last 2 UConn championships, they had Kemba Walker and they had Shabazz Napier last year.
Yeah.
Just 2 great guards, and now they're doing great in the NBA too.
Exactly.
But, it's all about that guard play.
Absolutely, I would agree. And we'll go much more in depth on that on 785 Live this Thursday. So what would that be? The 27th? 27th? Yeah, 27th. As for the rest of KU sports, they were also in action. Men's golf, your beat for the UDK. Mm-hmm. They won their first tournament since 2013 by winning the Desert Shootout. What did they do really well in that one?
They had the lead all 3 days. I mean, that was the biggest thing. But they shot a best -9. Overall, they were 8 strokes ahead of the other leader, so they played really good. Brock Dragic, the redshirt freshman, he had the best round by far by all of them, and also Chase Hanna, who he had a -5, shot 67, 1 eagle, 5 birdies.
He's just a star.
Yeah, so. He played over winter break. He played an pro amateur, so he's going to be great, and he's only a sophomore, so we're going to see a lot coming from him. Also, junior Benwell, him and freshman Daniel Hudson, they tied for 18th, and they shot -5 as well.
Right.
So they just all around they had their career best rounds. I think that's what just got them there.
Absolutely. It's nice to see that team's having success, and they expect a lot of themselves, and Coach Bermel expects a lot of them in terms of how much work they put in, what they can do. And Erin O'Neill expects the same of her team, and you cover them now as well.
Yeah,
And
that's breaking news from yesterday, last night.
So it's a good time to be a Jayhawk golf fan. You know,
Yeah.
both teams
They're
are
playing right now as we speak
in San Diego.
in San
correct?
Diego
Yeah.
in a match play tournament, which is a little bit different.
Oh yeah, that's I was in terms of watching golf. I love watching match play the most. You know,
It's
I do
kinda
like
like
watching golf, but match
It's
play
kind of like
is-
March Madness with golf. You got the bracket, you got the players, you got the rankings. It's all.
Yeah, it's all there. So I do love in the FedEx Cup they have a match play.
Mm-hmm.
On the professional level, they have a match play tournament during the FedEx Cup, and that's one of my favorite events to watch. In terms of watching golf, I mean, I'm more of a-
The Ryder Cup's that way too.
Yeah, the Ryder Cup is really fun. I do like the Ryder Cup. KU softball, KU baseball also in action. You want to go good news or bad news first?
Let's go. Good news.
Good news, KU softball is
Oh,
still
yeah.
on fire. They're
And they
29
hit
and 2.
milestones.
Yeah.
Coach Smith got her 300th
300th win.
and Maddie Stein, the senior utility player, she took the lead in all-time RBIs in program history.
Wow.
They outscored teams 31-14 on the weekend. The Jayhawks now hold a 29-2 record on the season overall. Coach Megan Smith also recorded her 300th win as a Kansas coach on Sunday after the Jayhawks' 5-4 win over Georgia State. Here's what Coach Smith had to say about her accomplishment.
You know, 300 wins, it's awesome. You know, I've been a part of some great programs, great assistant coaches. You know, it's really the players that go out and play hard for me. It's not about me, and, you know, really proud to do that here at Kansas.
They won the other day on a walk-off home run,
Yes.
so the hitting's been very powerful. Also, they had multiple home runs in a game against Georgia State, which they won 8-6, and against UMKC.
Exactly. And they played a great game against UMKC. They played 2 great games against Georgia State. They're about to start conference play, and I think at this point they're probably a favorite to win the Big 12.
They got
at this point.
they got a tough division with Texas being there, and Texas is highly ranked too. But I think the way they're playing, they can easily compete with Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really good. At the end of the day, they're a really good team that has some star players that really get the job done, and they've got some good power hitters. And like you said, the milestones and the walk-offs, and it's all there. This is a team that can go far in the tournament, certainly. They play Drake tomorrow, actually, and then they begin conference play against Texas. And that's at home, so their next couple games are at home.
Always good to be at home when you start conference.
Absolutely. Rock Chalk Park is beautiful.
Oh yeah, it's great. A Rock Chalk ballpark, Aracha, however you say it.
Yeah.
It's a tongue twister, but yeah, it's beautiful out there.
It's a great
All the
ballpark.
women's facilities out there, even the soccer and the track and field, beautiful out there.
Absolutely, and I'll be going to the next couple games. I'll be doing color commentary on KU Athletics for softball, so I'll get to experience all that. It should be fun, and I'm excited to really see how everything goes and have fun with it. Really have fun with it. On the baseball side of things, that's the bad news here. They have a losing record. The pitching is shaky at best. Drew Morvik, who was the Friday starter, he was the Tuesday starter last year. He suffered an injury, so he's now the Sunday starter. So you've got untested arms that are running through your first 2 days. And the offense is going to be there, but unfortunately, other teams, especially teams in the Big 12, they can come in with tough pitchers, shut your offense down, and if Kansas doesn't score 6 runs, they don't win a game.
Yeah, we saw in the 2 games this weekend, they didn't score more than 4 runs. Again, so they gave up 6 runs yesterday, 3 runs on Saturday. They gave up too many runs, and they can't produce.
Exactly. And Connor McKay, he's pretty good.
Yeah, that robbing of a home run yesterday, that was a great play. I don't know why they didn't get on top 10.
Absolutely. But that was a tremendous play, really.
We're making the highlight reel this year. We're just not winning games.
Yeah. Well, between he and Blair Beck, they've got 7 home runs and 24 RBIs already. The offense is, it's as dominant as you want it to be, really. It's about as good as it can get. The pitching, however, not so much. There's only one pitcher on the team with a winning record. It's Ben Krauth, who's actually the new Friday starter after Moravec got hurt. He won the only game of the Iowa series on Friday. So he's 4-2, but he does have a 5.45 ERA. It's not a good sign when your closer has a 3.32. Stephen Valines is considered probably the best, most tested pitcher on the staff. He's got a 3.32, just 6 saves. So, at the end of the day, it seems like we've said this every time we talk about baseball on the show. They just have to get better pitching.
Yeah, the pitching's very young, and that's the issue. In upcoming years, we're going to lose our hitting with McKay being a senior, and also
a lot of the great hitters on the team. McKay's a senior. I believe Blair Beck's a senior.
So all hitting's going to go away, and our pitching's going to get better because they're young now, and they're going to get better as the years go on.
Right.
So we're going to have, for the next couple of years here, we're going to have some rough patches with KU baseball.
Yeah, I think so too. But, at the end of the day, Rich Price, he's a good coach. He's a great coach. So he'll figure it out. He'll find a way to figure it out and keep things moving. Hopefully the pitching will develop because as the team loses hitters, their pitchers gain experience.
Mm-hmm.
These pitchers, it's not like they're bad pitchers. They're just young. They haven't been through the rigors of a full college season, and they don't really they haven't found their way yet.
And some of them might find out that they're better relievers, short inning guys or long inning guys, and that's what you do. You figure out with your first year. You figure out
exactly
where you're going to be in that rotation.
Exactly, and it happens on every level. So as the hitters start to leave, the pitchers will start to develop, and they'll get better. And that's just the cycle of college sports, really. That's just how college sports work. So I'll be excited to see how that happens. I'm a big college basketball guy, but as soon as Virginia lost, I started to cry because that
was my
obliterated my bracket.
That was my champion.
Same here.
And I also had Baylor my Final Four. So when they lost to Georgia State, my bracket was done. I had Iowa State Elite Eight. My bracket was done first 2 games. So not too great for me.
Yeah. Well, when that happened, I decided I better check out the NBA, and Russell Westbrook, he's tearing it up. Again,
10 triple doubles.
He's got 10 triple doubles this year. He's amazing. He's at this point, there's no doubt in my mind he's the best athlete to ever play point guard. Because
people were saying Chris Paul, but now Russell Westbrook definitely overtook Chris Paul.
Absolutely not Chris Paul. I think the only man that he still had to overtake, I think, was probably Allen Iverson, just in terms of pure raw athletic ability.
Well, all time, I think Oscar Robertson's the best. He averaged a triple double every game when he played.
I still think Westbrook's a better athlete than Robertson.
Okay.
I think
if
we're talking raw athletic talent, obviously Robertson is a better point guard, but Russell Westbrook I think is a better just raw athlete. He's a 5-tool athlete, as good as they get. There's another point guard who's been having a couple triple doubles. It's Elfrid Payton. You may not have heard of him because he's from Louisiana Lafayette.
And he plays for Orlando Magic too. That's another.
Yeah, there you go. So he's a rookie from a college that you've probably never watched for a team that you probably don't watch. They do have a fantastic mascot.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen their football team?
Yes.
I do love watching the football team.
They've won the New Orleans Bowl the last 5 years. They just own that bowl. That's their bowl game.
Yeah, pretty much. But he's pretty good. And he's averaged a triple-double in his last couple games. He's had 2 in a row. He's the first Magic player to ever do that. He's only the 7th rookie all time. He's the first since 97, I believe, when Antoine Walker did it. How good can he be going forward?
I think being on the Magic, he can be a superstar because the Magic aren't all that great. So I think in the long run, it's going to help him because he'll be a superstar and they can build a team around him because they need somebody to build a team around. When Dwight Howard left, they had a couple years of just slumps and didn't have that key player, and I think he could be that key player.
I think Peyton in the first half of his season definitely benefited from having Jameer Nelson there. Obviously, Nelson left to go to the Nuggets, but Peyton certainly benefited from having Nelson there to kind of show him the ropes, and definitely that veteran guy that you can kind of learn under his wing and kind of learn how you're going to play the game, especially when you're playing for Orlando, who's not playing for a whole lot. Although in the Eastern Conference, you think about it, Orlando, they're really one player away from being in playoff contention.
Yeah, if you're playing the Eastern Conference is it's weak at the bottom, and you can easily get a 7, 8, or 6 spot.
Exactly. I think it's still the case that at the very least the 8th seed, if not the 7th and maybe the 6th, are under 500. So
and they have been for the last couple of years. So,
yeah.
You could see one more player put in that system, you can get into the playoffs.
Yeah, if Peyton is as good as he's shown he can be in these stretch of triple doubles.
The Warriors are still disgustingly good, by the way, and they hold a 7.5 game lead over Memphis in the Western Conference. Oklahoma City sits in 8th in the incredibly tough conference, and with Kevin Durant still being shut down indefinitely, they'll have their hands full holding off the Suns for that last playoff spot.
Warriors versus Hawks. That's obviously an NBA Finals that most experts don't predict is going to happen. In the past couple years, teams without a true superstar have not fared so well in the NBA playoffs, and the Hawks don't have a true superstar.
We saw them lose yesterday 5-15 to the Spurs. So that shows you.
But what I will say is that the Spurs never had a real, quote unquote superstar. I mean, obviously Tony Parker and Tim Duncan are better than
with Ginobili and Parker and Duncan.
I mean, they're better than say an Al Horford and a Trey Teague and Kyle Korver. But at the same time, the Hawks they're a solid team from top to bottom, and they might show us all that a great team of 10 guys, as opposed to a good team with a superstar, can actually win the NBA playoffs. That being said, the Warriors are much better than the Hawks, I would say.
Oh, yeah. With Steph Curry at running the point guard, there's nobody better.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the Western Conference.
I mean, he's different than Russell Westbrook, and I think right now Russell Westbrook is a better point guard. But if you're talking about who I want to take, say, the last shot in a game, I still want Steph Curry.
Did you see that ad about Steph Curry where it's like Clyde Drexler's talking about how great of a guard he is?
Yeah, I did see that, and Steve Nash was too. He was like, it's beautiful to watch and everything. Speaking of Steve Nash,
that's a good segue. That's a great segue.
He called it quits after 19 seasons. He hung him up, and he's one of the greatest point guards in the last 20 or 30 years. One of the best of all time. He's my kind of guy, true point guard. He was a fantastic shooter. He's had 4 seasons where he shot 40% from the field, 90% from the free throw line, and or 50% from the field, 90% from the free throw line, and 40% from 3. He's had 4 seasons with that. No one else has had more than 2. By the way, those 2 were Larry Bird. So it's pretty good company to be in. He was a percentage point off from averaging that throughout his career. He's a career 49% shooter from the field, but he shoots 42% from 3 and 91% from the line. So he's 1 percentage point off from averaging that for his career. He's second all time in assists. In his 120
field goal percentage.
Yep, in his 120th or his 120 playoff games, he averaged more points, more assists than he did in the regular season. So he's never been to a finals. He hasn't won a ring, but he was part of some pretty not good Suns teams.
That seems to be the question, surrounding his legacy. If, whether or not him winning a ring really hurts him, because he's actually the only MVP that is not currently playing to never make a finals appearance. So there have been others that haven't won a championship, but he's the only one there. But in the playoffs, I think you just look at the guy. The Suns have had a lot of things work against them. They've had a refereeing scandal. They've had injuries, Amari Stoudemire specifically. They've had, suspensions. There was a game where players left the bench, got suspended for the end of the series, and that kind of cost the Suns against the Spurs. But if you actually look at his performance in the playoffs, he's had some memorable ones. Take his, 2004 or 5 series against the Mavericks. He averaged 30 points, 12 assists, 5 rebounds per game, shooting 100% from the line, or 96% from the line. He was, he's certainly done it all.
And he made them look good too.
Exactly. I mean, he made them what they were. Yeah. But you look at some of the guys that were on that team. Certainly not befitting of an NBA Finals team. But he brought them to the precipice. He brought them to the Western Conference Finals several times. And they were the victim of a referee scandal.
Stoudemire pretty much carried those teams.
Pretty much. So, but he will have a lasting legacy, I believe.
Of course, there's a couple years there with Shaq as well. that wasn't very very good, but.
Oh, well, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Finally, I mean, I know you're not a big soccer guy, but soccer, it's really starting to heat up. The MLS is just starting to get going. Sporting KC, they're still looking for their first win. They drew the Portland Timbers over the weekend. It was the first game back in Sporting Park since the opener. So now they'll travel to NYCFC, who's coming off a draw of the Rapids in Colorado. I wanted to go to that game because I was there. I wasn't able to go. But what I heard was NYC, they played for the draw. You know, they weren't really out there to win the game. So we'll see if it changes at all at home. After that, KC comes back to Sporting Park. They played 2 games. And you know, maybe they can capture a win in one of those. Sporting Park is one of the most unique home field advantages in the country.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it. So
it's a beautiful park.
I can allude to that if I'm not a soccer fan, but I can allude to that.
It is a beautiful park. And elsewhere in Europe, it's heating up as well. Champions League quarterfinals draw was announced. 2 matchups really intrigue me. It's Barcelona PSG, and then the in-state, I guess you'd call it, rivalry in Madrid. It's Real and Atletico.
Yeah, I also heard that Ibrahimovic is definitely staying at PSG. There was rumors that he was going to be shipped off.
Well, there's always rumors about Ibra. There's always rumors because he's been to every team. Pretty much, every team outside of England, any major team, you name one, he's been there. Whether it's the Italian giants, AC Milan, he's been there. If it's in the Netherlands and Ajax, he's been there. He's been just about everywhere you could think of. But really, the problem with him was he criticized the French fan base. He criticized French referees, French coaches, even the style of play in France. And so, obviously, not a lot of fans took too well to that. But he's an awfully good player still. Yes. So I think PSG would still want to keep him. So I'm really excited to see that matchup. I really want to see PSG likes to put Cavani on the wing. I'd love to see him against Dani Alves, because Alves has not had to play some great wingers outside of having to play Real Madrid and Atletico. Valencia's got decent play on the wings, but nothing like Cavani. So even though Cavani is not a true winger, seeing him compete against Dani Alves, I'm really excited to see that. And obviously, the Madrid derby, it's Atletico, Real. Real on paper much more talented, but in that game, you can pretty much, in those legs, you can pretty much throw everything out the window.
Atletico has taken down Real Madrid this season.
And even without Diego Costa, they still look dangerous. They lost Thibaut Courtois, they lost Diego Costa, both of those guys. Courtois was on loan from Chelsea. Costa actually ended up going to Chelsea, ironically. But, they're still a very good team. They're very, very well coached. And I think they can give Real Madrid a run for their money, even though Madrid is objectively the most talented team in the world. With Ronaldo, they got Bale, who's been struggling a little bit as of late, but he's still one of the best in the world in terms of wingers. And James Rodriguez, they've got some serious talent there. So I'm really excited to see that matchup. Who is going to win the finals in the NCAA tournament if it's not Virginia?
I think it's honestly going to be Kentucky. They, as much as I want to see them lose, they have it the easiest setup to the final.
They really do.
Like their first 2-round games are cakewalks for them.
Yeah,
they played the only team with losing record in the first round, and then they beat San Diego State by 19. And I think Notre Dame's probably going to be the best team they play all the way until the Final Four.
Probably. So, and then they'll get Wisconsin maybe in the Final Four. Wisconsin's the one seed in the region. Or Arizona, that's a pick. I think Duke's going to win it because I don't think when Kentucky faces adversity, I don't know if they'll be able to bounce back because they haven't lost all season. Exactly. They haven't had to do it yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it will be a Kentucky-Duke final.
And I think
because they both have the easiest ways to the final.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a coaching battle, and Coach K will win the coaching battle
because of he has the most experience being in that position over Calipari.
Yeah, so I think Duke's going to win it all at the end of the day. For next week, we'll be able to talk about Sweet 16 Elite 8. So we'll be able to break down all those matchups. A little bit more soccer will have happened, and of course, all manner of KU sports in action over the weekend. Golf teams, baseball, softball.
We're just gonna jump
rowing.
We're just gonna jump start.
They're all in action. Yep. So join us next week, and we'll talk about all that. And of course, join us in the morning at 10 on the TV, so that we can talk about everything KU related and really anything that we would like to. I'll be hosting again next week. Jackson's still in Europe, so hopefully we can get a Skype from him, and he can kind of share his adventures with us. But until then, thanks for joining us on 10 at 10 The Bottom Line. We'll see you next week.